Welcome to our lesson recaps in Academic Literacy 1. Basically, we'll cover all the major points we have covered in week 9, week 10, and week 11. So we will revise all key major points. Where do we find academic information? As a student, writing a college essay can be an uphill struggle. Hence, a good essay will cost you several trips to the library, hours of taking notes, and sleepless nights poring over online database. While the internet has a huge pool of information, you should always remember as a student that writing an academic essay requires academic content. So the big question becomes, where do you find information? You get the most out of the library, but however, some students have a tendency to gravitate towards online research, but the library is still a treasure trove of information. There is nothing wrong with looking for information on the internet, but still you need to utilize the library. Library databases allow you to efficiently search for published information, such as magazines and journal and newspaper articles. Then we also have scholarly sources versus peer-reviewed sources. Scholarly sources are written by experts for other experts, researchers, or students. Peer-reviewed sources do the same thing, but go a step further. These sources are reviewed by the author's peers who are experts in the same subject area. That means a peer-reviewed source is often more credible than a scholarly source. Library portals. Library portals are user-centered, typically web-based gateways to library information, services, and resources. These systems provide users with convenient, often personalized access to comprehensive collection of information, resources of relevance and authority. The library portal is one approach to organize information, resource, and service in a way that supports the user's needs. Okay, so we have types of libraries. We have academic, public, national, and special library. Remember, a library is the storehouse of knowledge for posterior use. Human knowledge can be recorded and preserved in different media. Okay, some years back, documents written or printed in a paper were considered as the best medium, but with the development of science and technology today, electronic multimedia have been widely used for preservation of knowledge in the libraries of any kind. So according to the mode of services rendered to the readers, libraries are broadly divided into 4 types: academic library, spatial library, public library, and national library. Okay, so these are the types of libraries that we do have. Okay, so academically, library. Academic library is the library which is attached to academic institutions like schools, colleges, and universities, like the ones that we have at Boston Media House campuses. An academic library serves more specifically the students, research scholars, teachers, and staff of the academic institution. And the main objective of an academic library is to give maximum learning materials to its clientele. Then we have a college library. College performs an important function in educational processes. A college without a library is like a tree with no roots. Where are you going to get the information? Where are you going to do your research? So the status of every college is measured through the position of the library that it maintains. Hence, every college library should become a teaching instrument in itself. Then we have spatial library that became popular since the beginning of the 20th century. A spatial library is one which serves a particular group of people, such as the employees of a company, a firm, of a government department, or the staff and members of a professional or research organization. Such a library deals essentially in information. Then we also have a public library. What does a public library do? It is a library which is accessible by the public and is generally funded from public sources, such as tax money, and may be operated by the civil servants. Taxing bodies for public libraries may be at a level from local to national central government level. The public library is an excellent model of government at its best, a locally controlled public good. It serves every individual freely. Then we have National Library. A national library is a library specifically established by the government of a country to serve as the preeminent repository of information for that country. Unlike public libraries, these rarely allow citizens to borrow books. Often they include numerous, rare, valuable, or significant works. Okay, then we have the digital library. It is a collection of documents in organized electronic form, available on the internet or on a CD-ROM, which is your compact disc read-only memory. These are discs. Depending on the specific library, a user may be able to access magazines, articles, books, papers, image, sound files, and videos. Digital libraries are internet sites. Digital libraries are internet sites where you can get more information about the particular subjects and stuff like that. Of course, library website provides, which provides a library with a website to offer its services and to tell its story to its community. Library websites typically contain anywhere from a couple dozen searchable databases to well over 100. These databases, often called electronic resources, allow people to search library catalogs, journal articles, corporate financial data, and a wide variety of other data from an extremely diverse group of information providers, each with unique searching interface. So library website means the internet-based application hosted and operated by Overdrive that provides authorized patrons access to digital content. So these are all types of libraries that we have that we can utilize when we are doing our research. So as students, we can utilize all these type of libraries to get information when we are writing our formative, summative assignments, when we are doing our research, when we are doing our homeworks as well. At mathematical literacy, maths literacy. It is very important for everybody to understand how to add, how to subtract, how to divide numbers, because we use this in our everyday lives. When you're out shopping or using public transport or filling fuel at a filling station, or whether you're in a taxi, you need to understand simple basic mathematics. So math literacy is a very important subject as it equips you with the understanding of basic mathematics. Okay, so before you get into detail, now, let's look at ethics and fair use in academic lit. What are we talking about? Ethics is based on well-founded standards of right and wrong that prescribe what humans ought to do, usually in terms of rights, obligations, benefits to society, fairness, or specific virtues. Okay, some years ago, sociologist Raymond Barthes asked business people, what does ethics mean to you? Among their replies were the following: ethics has to do with what my feelings tell me is right or wrong. Ethics has to do with my religious beliefs. Being ethical is doing what the law requires. Ethics consists of the standards of behavior our society accepts. I don't know what the word means. This is what some of the other people said. These replies might be typical for our own. Very true. We might not really understand what ethics is or what ethics are. So the meaning of ethics is hard to pin down. And many people have about ethics. How we define ethics is usually shanky, meaning it's not quite correct. Okay. But however, when we are talking of ethics and fair use, there are certain values and principles that we talk about that cycles ethics. You look at integrity, morals, honesty, principles, right, fairness, responsibility, conscience, honor, choice, and values. So now the next question becomes, what is academic ethics? directed by respect of ethical beliefs and values, and for the dignity and rights of others, related to concepts such as trust, honesty, consideration, and fairness. Enacting academic integrity means taking action with responsibility, honest, respect, trust, fairness, encouraging any activity related to academic work, and avoid any kind of cheating. That's your academic ethics. Okay, so enacting academic integrity means taking action with responsibility, and you're avoiding any kind of cheating or dishonest action, even when the work is especially difficult. You have to make sure there is always honest, highest levels of honest integrity. Then you have the right to privacy. The right to privacy is an element of different legal traditions that intends to restrain governmental and private actions that threaten the privacy of individuals. So the right to have one's personal matters disclosed or publicized, the right to be left alone. Yes, that's a right. The right against undue government intrusion into fundamental personal issues and decisions. So we are saying everyone has the right to privacy, which includes the right not to have, one, their person or home searched, their property searched, their possessions seized, or the privacy of their communications infringed. So everyone has the right to freedom of conscience, religion, thought, belief, and action. Those are your rights, and you're guaranteed that by the Constitution of South Africa. Now, let's look at what is cyber ethics then. The term cyber ethics refers to a set of moral rules or a code of behavior applied to the online environment. As a responsible netizen, you should observe these rules. You should be able to observe these rules to help make cyberspace a safe place. Cyber ethics is the philosophic study of ethics pertaining to computers, encompassing user behavior and what computers are programmed to do, and how this affects individuals and society. That's your cyber ethics. Under cyber ethics, you have copyright and downloading. This has become a major problem due to programs like Napster and LimeWire, and many other software programs that are available on the internet, which allow users to download music, programs, and videos for free. Millions of people, especially children, do not realize that this behavior has major consequences. It is against the law. So there are serious consequences to that. You look at hacking. Hacking is the international damage that a person inflicts onto another computer or computer network. This can include stealing classified information, stealing passwords to get into a site, and also changing a website without permission. That's hacking. Then what is cyber ethics? Then we look at cyberbullying. Bullying does not only happen in real life anymore. Things have changed now in the 21st century. Cyberbullying is growing and people are becoming aware of its effect on children, not only on children, but on everyone. The Megan Mia case shed light on this issue that was thought of by many as harmless bullying. This teenage girl was bullied on the internet through email and MySpace, which is said to ultimately lead to her suicide. And we have so many local examples as well, where people have been bullied on Twitter, Facebook. Cyber ethics, therefore, refers to the code of responsible behavior on the internet, just as we are taught to act responsibly in everyday life. We also need not to harm others. We must act responsibly in the cyber world as well. The basic rule is do not do something in cyberspace that should consider wrong or illegal in everyday life. Then we look at intellectual property rights. These are rights given to persons over the creations of their minds. They usually give the creator an exclusive right over the use of his or her creation for a certain period of time. Intellectual property rights are legal rights that provide creators protection for original works, inventions, or the appearance of products, artistic works, scientific developments, and so on. IP is then a term that describes the application of the mind to develop something new or original. It can exist in different forms. It can be, for example, a new invention, a brand, a design, or an artistic creation. So there are various types of IP available. Registered intellectual property rights serves as an incentive to reward innovation by the original creators. Okay, now, as it serves as an incentive to reward innovation by providing intellectual property creators and owners with the time and opportunity to exploit their creation. However, IP rights exist in different forms. In some cases, they don't need to be registered in order to be of value. Literal works and music, for example. Now, we look at mathematical literacy. No matter what field of academic study or professional career you have chosen to pursue, you need to engage with numbers. That's very true. Numerical calculations when doing different activities. You will need to read mathematical data, such as statistics, graphs, make decisions with regard to budgeting, be able to solve problems and calculate figures, amounts for daily business activities. So being mathematically literate means being able to understand and perform basic calculations with numbers by using the skills and concepts that you have learned either in primary, high school, and college. It also means you're able to apply these calculations and skills in relevant everyday context, where you may be confronted with familiar and unfamiliar examples and problems. Okay, so understanding the BODMAS order of operations, which is your BODMAS, is one of the applications that you need to understand when you are calculating a simple mathematics. Okay, so in mathematical literacy, you need to understand the BODMAS order of operations, which basically means you brackets, orders, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. This convention of completing operations in a particular order is often referred to as BODMAS, which is an acronym representing the order in which the operations in a calculation must take place if multiple operations are present, which means you start off with your brackets, you look at your orders, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. So this is one of the key basic formula that you need to understand in calculating simple mathematics. Okay, so the acronym stands for the following: brackets, orders. That your orders might be powers or square roots. For example, 2 plus 3 equals to 4 plus 3 equals to 7. Note that the 2 raised to the power of 2 must be calculated first. Then you move on to division, to multiplication, to addition, then obviously to subtraction. Now, note that when you just have a calculation with division and multiplication present, for example, 3 times 2 divided by 2 equals to 3, or subtraction and addition, for example, 3 minus 2 plus 3 equals to 4, you will work from left to right. It is helpful to remember this acronym when working with calculations involving multiple operations or different operations. Okay. Many additional types of mathematical concepts and calculations are required in academic world to calculate the average numbers of items sold in a month by a company, the percentage of a study, which will also be used throughout your career. For example, consider the requirements sales grouped according to the type of customers, rounding off attendance figures, or showing the relationship between numbers. These types of information, is required. Now, let's look at averages. Averages are normally used in relation to reading and making sense of data. When data is collected about something and represented numerically, we often want to determine the info that applies across the range of participants or items in a study. For example, in your studies, you may want to compare your individual assignment mark to the average mark of the entire class. In other contexts, we may want to know the average score obtained by a sports team or the average income earned by people in a particular profession. The proper mathematical term for the average is the mean. We calculate the mean or average of a set of data by adding all the values in the data set and then dividing the total by the number of values in the set. That's how we calculate average. And it is very simple. For example, the assignment was completed by a class of 13 students, and they got different marks, 56, 57, 76. So all these are different marks that they did get. Then there are 13 values, meaning 13 students. So the method that you're going to use to calculate the average, you add all 13 values together, then you divide by the total of 13. Your calculation should look like 61 after you round off. So the average mark for this assignment is therefore 61 out of 100. That's how we calculate average. Now we move on to percentages. A percent is a numerical value expressed as a quantity out of 100. In mathematical terminology, you could also say that a percentage is a common fraction within a denominator of 100. However, we do not write it as a common fraction. Instead, we write the number with a percent sign, which looks like 2 zeros over a division sign. So percentages are used to express quantities in an easily understandable way, which helps people to understand. Okay. For example, if we say 68% of the students passed, the data is easier to understand and evaluate than if we change that. We have to represent the average mark achieved by a class of students in the example form. Example, if you have to represent amount as a percent, you must express the number as an amount of 100. That's how we work with averages and percentages. Now, percentages, to work out the percentages of an amount is therefore the same as working out a fraction of an amount. For example, 30 of 90 equals to 30% of 90 is the same as 30 over 100 of 90. You therefore need to find out exactly how much is 30 hundredths of 90. This means you divide 90 into 100 parts and take 30 of those hundreds into 90. Then we look at fractions. Fractions are parts of a whole, like percentages. They are used to express quantities in relation to other quantities. The top number of a fraction is called the numerator. The bottom number is called the denominator. For example, 1 out of 6. So 1, that's your numerator, and 6, that's your denominator. So 1 over 6 of a whole tells us the whole has been divided into a 6 parts. Also, if we look at those two diagrams, you can see from the two diagrams that are appearing on the screen there, that we have 3 over 6, which is the same as saying 1 over 2, which is half. These fractions are equivalent fractions because we represent the same amount of parts, which is half of what we are seeing on the two diagrams below. We use equivalent fractions to compare and order fractions. We can make fractions equivalent by simplifying them or multiplying the numerator and denominator by the same number. For example, we simplify as follows. 3 out of 6 goes to 3 out of 3. If we divide 3 out of 6 by 3 and 3, we get half, which is 1 over 2. We are simplifying our fractions. Or we can multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number to get many other equivalent fractions. For example, 3 out of 6, if you multiply by 5, we get 15 out of 30. So 15 out of 30 again, if we divide by 3 now, we can get 5 out of 10. Once the fractions have the same denominator, then you can compare them and do calculations with them. Okay. Now, let's look at decimals. Decimal fractions are another way to write fractions with denominators of 10, 100, or 1,000. In other words, we express tens, hundreds, and thousands more often as decimal fractions. Decimal fractions are used more often in financial data. Most currencies have a decimal system. For example, in South Africa, there are 100 cents in every 1 rand. That is why when we write, we say 1 rand and 99 cents, 1.99, because we have 1 whole rand and 99 cents. Therefore, 5 out of 10 equals to 0.5, 5 out of 100 equals to 0.05, 5 out of 1,000 equals to 0.005. Accordingly, 0.5, it becomes bigger than 0.05. You can convert common fractions to decimal fractions by using your knowledge of equivalence, as discussed in other lessons as well. A quick way to convert common fractions into decimal fractions is to use a calculator to divide the numerator by the denominator, as calculators only use decimal fractions when doing calculations. So think of this. We can always use a calculator to do calculations with decimal fractions. When working with decimal fractions, we need to remember that we are working with fractions and not whole numbers only. For example, let's look at the amounts 7.02 and 3.99. Note that although 0.9 in 3.99 may look bigger than the 0.02 in the first number, however, 7.02 is still bigger as it contains 7 wholes and 2 out of 100, while 3.9 contains only 3 wholes, which is 99 over 100. So the process is simple when multiplying whole numbers by multiples of 10, such as 10, 100, or 1,000. Because we just add on the number of zeros that are in the number we are multiplying by. The multiple of 10 to our original number. For example, 7 times 10 equals 70, 7 times 100, 700, 7 times 1,000, 7,000. When multiplying decimal fractions by 10, 100, or 1,000. When multiplying decimal fractions by 10, 100, or 1,000, a pattern can also be seen. For example, 0.07 times 10 equals to 0.7. 0.07 times 100 equals to 7. 0.07 times 1,000 equals to 70. You can see the comma moves to the right for each time you multiply by 10. Conversely, when dividing by 10, the comma moves to the left. So you round off numbers. Rounding off is used when we estimate answers of calculations or manipulate numbers in order to make the calculation easier. For example, it is easier to calculate 300 times 20 than it is to calculate 324 times 24. We could do this first calculation mentally because it's very easy, while we may need to write numbers down or use a calculator to do the second calculation, 324 times 24. When doing the first calculation, it is now therefore important that we can use rounding off to convert the numbers into multiples of 10, which are easier to calculate mentally. Okay, when a calculator is not available, we often use rounding off to estimate answers to problems. Estimating answers before using a calculator is a valuable habit to develop and practice, as it can help you, the student, to determine the number range in which you can expect your answer to fall. If the answer produced on your calculator is far out of the estimated expected number range, it could be indicate that you've made an error on the calculator. Okay, so as with the BODMAS and general rules on working with fractions, there are also mathematical conventions that must be applied when rounding off numbers. When rounding off a number, one would round it off to a nearby value of your choice. The process works as follows. If rounding off to the nearest 10, look at the digit in the units column. If the digit is 4 or less, we round down. If the digit is 5 or more, we round up. That's basically a key rule to understand. For example, 54 is rounded down to 50 because we're 4 and less, while 55 is rounded up to 60 because we're 5 there. If rounding off to the nearest 100, you look at the digit in the tens column. For example, 134 is rounded down to 100. While 163 is rounded up to 200. If rounding off to the nearest of 1,000, you look at the digit in the hundreds column. For example, 2,254 is rounded down to 2,000, while 2,874 is rounded up to 3,000. That's how we do rounding off of numbers. This pattern continues regardless of the multiple of 10 you are using to round off a number. You can also round off decimal fractions in the same way. If rounding off 0.63 to the tens column, look at the hundreds column to determine how to round off the decimal fraction. In this instance, 0.63 will be rounded down to 0.6. Now, let's look at ratios now. A ratio describes the relationship between two quantities. We use ratios to compare quantities relating to measurements of length or mass or amounts of money, and etc., etc. For example, when you make a cocktail, the ratio required to make the drink is 1 glass of fruit to 5 glasses of lemonade. The ratio of glasses of cognac to glasses of lemonade to make the cocktail is written as follows: 1:5. Sometimes, as people, we might confuse sometimes ratio with proportion, as they are related concepts. Using the same example as above, the example that we just made of the cocktail, we would say the proportion of fruit cordial of the entire cocktail is 1/6. This is because the fruit cordial is 1 part of the all 6 parts of the liquid mixed together. We often use the proportion of quantities to calculate the relationship between 2 quantities. Okay, for example, say there are 50 items, we want to divide this quantity of items between 2 people. Okay, so let's say we have 50 oranges. The items need to be divided using the ratio 2:3. So we're going to divide 50 oranges using the ratio 2:3. Altogether, there are 5 parts, which is 2 and 3, because 2 plus 3 equals to 5. Therefore, 1 part is going to get 10 oranges or 10 items. Okay, because now 50 divided by 5, you get 10. That is the total number of oranges divided by the total number of parts. Therefore, person A will get 10 oranges times 2, which means you get 20 oranges. Person B will get 10 oranges times 3, which means you get 30 oranges. So person's A proportion of the total amount is 2/5, whilst person B proportion of the total amount is 3/5. That's how basically we work with proportion, and we also work with our ratio. Now, let's look at Microsoft Excel, which is a software program that we use also to calculate, to recalculate, to record, and plan numbers and statistics for different reasons. So the program can also be used to represent data in a graph or table formats. Okay. Microsoft Excel book also, you can create worksheets. In every worksheet, there are many rows, columns, and each block is called a cell. It is useful to think about each cell as an individual calculator. That's your Microsoft Excel. Like I said, you can use it in different ways. This can be used to calculate, to average, to create line graphs, to create also bar graphs, as I will demonstrate in the next second, how you can use Microsoft Excel to come up with bar graphs, pie charts, and line graphs. So when you're using Excel, you can use in each cell you enter, you can come up with a formula and calculations. When you enter a formula in a cell, Excel calculates the result of the formula and displays the result of the calculation in the cell. You can also link the different formulas together from different cells to combine calculations. The easiest way to make use of the functions in the cell is as follows. 1, ensure you've highlighted one cell. Enter the sign in a cell. The cell now known that you will be entering a formula into it. Type in your sum and press enter. Simple as that. That's how you work your basic math in Excel. And this program usually helps also students with your assignments if it requires you to